Hey guys, this is Mike, your host of Craft Beer Storm and also founder brewer at Beara Brewing Company in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. How are you today? We are continuing our craft beer exploration of the planet. We're going to Portugal today, and we're going to talk to Bruno Rodrigues. He's the assistant brewer for the brewery is called Portuguese Craft Beer, and they produce a couple of brands, which is very interesting. They have a good story behind them. I had a nice conversation with him and about the craft beer scene in Portugal in general. It was very interesting, things that I didn't know, but it's just great knowledge. So stay tuned. Here we go. Hey, we're here with Bruno Rodrigues. He is the assistant brewer for Portuguese Craft Beer. That is the actual brewery in Portugal. How you doing, Bruno?
How are you? Great.
All right.
Thanks for having me.
No, I'm glad we connected. And you don't think about Portugal for beer, right? Because it's a big wine country.
Yeah, exactly.
But beer is starting to take hold there, which is very interesting. And I connected with you, and tell me about your brewery. Tell me about you and where you're from and what you're doing there. Maybe we'll start out with that.
Okay, sure. So I'm actually from Canada. So my parents were immigrants. They immigrated to Canada like 40 years ago, something like that. So I was born in Toronto.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I was born in Toronto, but I moved back to Portugal when I was 10 years old. So I did all of my school here, high school, and college, and then last year I was looking for a job. And I was really interested in looking into starting working with beer. And so, this opportunity came. I started as an intern. Now I have a full-time contract and working here as an assistant brewer. I also do microbiology work. And that's basically it.
Yeah, we're talking about what you do at the brewery, and I compared it to me. And,
Yeah.
when you're a small brewery, you do everything
Exactly.
pretty much. I went out yesterday and I'm trying to sell kegs to people like, oh, what are you, the brewer? I'm like, yeah, I'm a brewer, owner, sales dude, server, sample server, festival guy. You do everything.
Yeah.
You do whatever you have to do to keep things moving. But
Exactly.
that's interesting. So now, and you have two brands there. I think it was Alma and then Amphora. And what are those names about, and what kind of beer are they?
Okay, so let's start with the older one, which is amphora. So amphora is it's a kind of a Roman vase, and it was thought to hold beer for the Romans.
Oh, very interesting.
And so the reason that why it was chosen this name because Braga is the city where I'm at. It has a very antique and Roman history. And so they wanted to play around with joining the name and the Roman theme. And basically all of the beer styles have a typical Roman name, like Gladiator, Arena, Bracara, which was the Roman name for Braga. And so it's very Roman-like, let's say it like that.
Because you're located in Braga, right? That's
northern Portugal, near Spain. And Alma means soul. So basically, Alma has a different approach. It tries to take key ingredients from different regions in Portugal, and each beer is named after a certain region. Mm-hmm. So here in Braga, the region is called Minho, so we call it Alma Minhota, so the soul of Minho. And it basically has, it's an IPA, it's an English IPA, and we use lots of hops because this area a long time ago was a great producer of hops. And so that's one of the reasons why we use the IPA and to characterize the Alma Minhota. And then there are lots of different regions, each of them with their special ingredient or ingredients. And then we try to play around the style to making a beer that can incorporate not only the ingredients, but also the style that we want it to have.
That's interesting because we like the local use of local products as well. So you do that for each region in Portugal. And the hops,
Yeah.
do they still grow hops there, or is it? Eh,
It's starting to come back because so craft beer is gaining a lot of interest in the past years, and so people are starting to instead of going into craft beer, they're going into hop production and hop growing hops, and so they're trying to bring that back. There are a few companies, I think there are like one or two that I know of, but there are small projects, and we're actually working with a small project trying to see if it's going to launch off and see if it grows. Maybe it's going to grow and be huge, and it will be cool.
that's awesome. Yeah, and now how's the climate up there? Is it a little wet climate or dry? I mean, because hops need water and sunlight, and there's a mix.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
I know.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so in Braga we call it the Penico do Céu, which basically means the potty of the skies. It rains a lot.
Okay.
Yeah, it rains a lot, especially in the winter and early spring. But then in the summertime, it's really hot.
Right.
So it's perfect weather for growing hops. So lots of water, and then lots of heat and sunlight. So they grow awesomely.
You're kind of like the Pacific Northwest over here in the
Yeah,
U.S., and that's
yeah,
where the big. You're in the northwest of Portugal, so
yeah,
yeah, it's a perfect climate to grow hops. That's awesome. You never would
yeah.
know. But I know the southern part of Portugal is it's a big like a beach town, beaches and right. There's a lot of people
Yeah.
that go there. Yeah,
Yeah, in the south, it's beaches, lots of tourists, lots of French, English, German. So lots of beaches. And here
wow,
in the north, it's very green, very nice, very quieter. Let's call it like that.
that's beautiful. Now, and we talked also about Portugal is really known for wine. And a lot of good
Yeah.
wine comes out of Portugal, and now you're trying to get into the craft beer. And how has that been, like that mix? I guess you're competing with wine, or how is that working out?
Well, I think we're never going to be able to compete with wine. I think wine has its own market. It's been around for centuries, so we're never going to be able to compete with it. Even with big beers, it's going to be hard to compete. So craft beer, I think it's a niche. There are beer geeks that love craft beer, and as long as they exist, we're always going to have craft beer.
Mm-hmm.
But the wine is something different. It's so Portugal has lots and lots of wine cultures growing almost everywhere. Even normal people, they make it at their homes for their own consumption, and so there's always going to be this preference towards wine rather than beer.
Right.
But I think there's space for both of us. So especially in the summertime, lots of beer is in the market, and it's being sold. So yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting, and what I do here is I try to, because a lot of wine they pair with food, right?
Yeah.
But I'm trying to promote craft beer too, and say, hey, wine is great with food, but there's also certain types of craft beer that you can pair with food. You can use craft beer in making certain dishes because
Exactly.
it's so complex, and that's what we do. But I think it's so overwhelming the wine culture there, which is delicious wine too. And actually, I had my cousin married the Portuguese guy. They made grappa at home.
Oh, okay.
But that was really good. I don't know if they make it anymore, but we're all looking for it. And every time we saw him, I said, "Do you have any grappa?" Because the way they made it was really good. It was really good. So, but that's another just a byproduct of the wine. But so, You do have the big beer. Is there any big popular big beer there? I know, like in the U.S., there's Budweiser, there's Coors Light. Is there something there that's a major beer?
Yeah, there's two major brands. One is called Superbock, and the other one is called Sagres. And they basically, one dominates the north, the other one dominates the south.
No kidding.
And beer geeks hate them both. Yeah, it's normal. But here's the thing: they're the most consumed beer in Portugal. Either one. So you have both
right.
of those two brands. But interestingly, they're trying to get into the craft beer market as well.
Yeah.
So you have some special editions, which they call craft beer. And then there's always a discussion if you could really call it craft beer because they're they're made in huge quantities. So it's hard to say what actually is craft beer. If it has to be handmade, it has to be in small batches. So we shouldn't go in there because that's a long conversation. But basically, they have these let's say smaller brands or sub brands, and they have these special editions with hops, and they do, instead of doing normal super light beer, they do trying to do an IPA, trying to do a wheat beer, and they have special editions with only with Cascade hops. So they're trying to get into that that market.
Right. Yeah, and we say like craft beer, it's really crafty beer. It's not really true craft beer, but
exactly.
I mean they're doing this because another point you brought up is you're kind of taking share away from the big beer. I think craft accounted for about 6 to 8% of beer consumption in Portugal, and that's a lot. You know, that's a lot. And
yeah, it is a lot.
So you know they are looking into that, and it's the same thing here. You know they're you know, a couple times before there was a craft boom, but it was kind of squashed. But now it's kind of taken hold. I mean, it's not going away, and they're seeing this, and only you know, the amount of breweries in the United States has grown, you know, pretty much exponentially.
Yeah.
Over the past couple of years, and it's still going. You know, there's more and more breweries opening up, even in my state in New Hampshire. I was just talking to you yesterday. You know, when I started 2014, there was like 20 of us sitting around a table. That was the breweries in New Hampshire. Now there's over 90. You know, that's like 4 years later, so it's quadrupled.
Wow. Yeah, it's a huge number.
It's a big number for the state, and there's a lot more competition. And you know, I see it, and a lot of other brewers see it, and it's just a matter of, okay, what do you do from here? Where do you go? But it is, you know, they're always going to be a trend towards the local. Is that what you see in Portugal? People like local. They look for local breweries that are popping up, and people like local stuff.
Yeah. So there are a couple of breweries craft breweries that are super well known all across the country, and that's basically because they're either because they're older, so they've been around for longer periods of time, or they're they make super different stuff like sours and I don't know, raspberry stouts that are barrel aged and stuff like that. So they're really good at what they do, and so those are basically consumed all around Portugal. But then you have, of course, the local consumption of beer, and that consumption is mainly done by locals that prefer our local beer. And since we also play, for example, if we go back to our brand Alma, since we play around with the regions and the ingredients of certain regions, people from that region want to buy that beer. And because it says something to them. So it's like, as I said before, it's like they want to put on the jersey for the local team and they want to support it. So you're always going to count with those guys to buy you at least a box of beer of 12 pack, something like that. And so those guys will always buy some beer from you. So
what?
Those guys are guaranteed.
And that's interesting about the packaging. I mean, what do you see there? Because here everything is trending towards cans. Everything's in 16-ounce cans. Do you see the same thing there, or is it still bottles? Or how do people buy their beer there?
So bottles is still the standard.
Mm-hmm.
Bottles is the standard. I think the second standard would be drinking it on tap at craft beer bars.
Uh-huh.
So there are a lot of beer bars that are increasing. So we had until like, I don't know, a year and a half ago, there were like 0 beer bars in Braga. And now there's at least, well, when I say beer bars, they're bars that are exclusively focused on beers.
Uh-huh.
And not like snack bars that have snacks and they buy a lot of foreign beers so I'm not talking about those guys. So really craft beer bars. And so now a year and a half later we have like, I don't know, like five beer bars, and it's a small city, so it's a lot of bars per person. And regarding the cans, I think now there may be starting to be a trend to go towards cans, but I still don't know. So we're going to have to see if it goes on or not.
Yeah, I don't know about Europe. That's a good question. I mean, are things still in bottles or in cans? Here, it's just all cans, which is.
Yeah.
Well, it's hard for me because I'm a smaller brewer. Originally, I had these 22-ounce bottles, which was great. That's why I got into the I started a brewery because I said, okay, I can make a living off this because I have the 22 ounces. The margin's good. But now everything's shrunk to cans, and the materials and the label and the labor, and then you got to get a canning line.
Exactly.
It's just too much, and I can't do it, unfortunately. So I'm trying to trend everybody towards bottles again. It's not working so far, but I see in Europe a lot of stuff comes in bottles, even when I go there.
Yeah.
But it's still bottles in Europe, which is interesting.
It's like, let's say 90%, maybe 95% bottles still. So it's a lot of bottles, and for us it's easy because we're small. We do everything by hand. So basically, we take 6 bottles at a time and we fill them up.
I know.
We put them on the table and somebody else puts a cap on them, and that's how we work.
Yeah, I do. So, we do the same. I tried to do that with cans here too, and it was ridiculous. Like we did like 4 guys, 6 hours. We made like 40 cases. It was nothing. 20 cases went out the next day, and then we had 20 cases left, and that was gone. So we just couldn't keep up with the demand for the beer and the cans. But all right, well, that's the packaging for you. And so, what kind of beers are hot there? Like craft beer, you say sour beer. Is that hot there? Or?
Yeah, I think so. Something that's hot everywhere are IPAs. Everybody loves IPAs. They love American IPAs, English IPAs, so that's hands down still here. IPAs are
everywhere,
probably number one. Yeah, exactly. But sour beers are becoming a trend. So here in Braga, we have a lot of Brazilians. So they've immigrated from Brazil into Portugal, and they chose Braga. Braga is one of the biggest city with Brazilians, and they love sour beers. They love sour beers. And so I think it's gonna be huge. And there are breweries that specifically work only with sour beers, which I think is super risky, but probably going to pay off a lot if it works well. Yeah,
I think for the short term that'll be boom because the sour beer is booming here. A couple of years ago, people still drink sour beers here. I guess not as much, but one of the chefs that I had a chef on, and she had a good point about the culture, because the American culture is really not like it lends itself to a sour beer. Like the foods are not pickly. You know what I'm saying? Like they're not acidic. Where like in certain parts of Europe, sour beers are popular. because the foods are acidic. But here it's not that way, so it's not going to really blow up. But who knows? Who knows? I know the IPAs, are going to continue indefinitely because the hops are so good, and now they're breeding hops and they're making new flavors, and I think
exactly
more and more people are when they come off of the bland beers and they find craft beer. One of the first beers that they gravitate to is the IPAs because they're just delicious. So
yeah, exactly.
I think that makes sense. So Portugal is on the rise with craft beer, which is very interesting.
Yeah, I think it's in the last years it's been really something. I remember. So the first craft brewery that I know is actually a craft brewery that's not far from here, and they started at the university where I was studying, and it was like a final project, something like that, and it launched into a full-on super brand, and they're one of the most well-known craft breweries in Portugal.
Wow!
And so at that time there were like, I don't know, 5, maybe 10 breweries, and now I'm not sure. I'm just going to say a number that I think that maybe be around like 250 breweries, and it's a small country, so it's like. I'm going to say kilometers because I don't know I don't know the distance in miles. But it's like 800 kilometers from one end of the country to the other one. So it takes like 6 hours car drive. And so it's 250 breweries for such a small country. And these are only the breweries that are registered. So the ones that that are producing beer according to the law and selling it according to with financial records and stuff like that. Because then there are a lot of people that make beer at home, and they make it for themselves and for their friends, and maybe sell it to a coffee shop or to a small bar that they know the owner or something like that. So it's really, 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 really growing, and it's growing really fast.
Now, if you make beer at home, can you sell it to people, or how does that work? Or do you need like a license? Or
technically, no, you cannot. You cannot
technically,
you can't. You can't sell it. You can't sell it. You can't even make it. It's illegal to make beer at home.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, it is. It is.
Oh, wow.
Because so going back to the wine country and stuff like that. Besides wine, so wine is the major alcoholic beverage here in Portugal, and they don't pay as many taxes as beer and other liquors.
That's
and
interesting.
So basically, the institution that applies the taxes is the customs. So the customs, like you see at the airport, I don't know why, but it's the law. They're the ones that do it. And so basically, we have 2 rooms here in our brewery that are outside of the customs regulation, but all of the rest of the brewery is inside the customs regulation. What does this mean? So you can make beer in those 2 rooms, but once it comes out of those 2 rooms, it has to be fully paid regarding taxes. You have to identify the beer. You have to say what batch it is, how long it's going to be on the shelf life, and you have to pay the taxes right away. So basically, sometimes getting the license for these rooms is like 2-3 years. There are breweries that have closed because of the time it took for them to start reproducing a beer, because most likely they changed locations and they needed a new place and a new license to make the beer. And so you can imagine that it's not worthy, and it's super difficult and expensive to get a license to produce beer at home. So basically, people just produce it and they don't tell it. They don't tell anybody. It's like let's say it like a small version of producing moonshine in the States.
Yeah. It's interesting in a country. I guess you don't have. Do you have states that you say you have regions, but are there states in Portugal? I'm not sure.
Well, we call it regions. They're not really states because they don't have a local government.
Okay.
So it's just like a physical separation from the the next state, and so we just call it regions, and it's easier to identify.
So it's the government of Portugal regulates all the beer and the taxes and all that.
Yeah, exactly. So besides paying, you have to pay the taxes when you make it, and then you have to pay the taxes when you sell it. So a lot of taxes.
I do the same thing here. I mean, in New Hampshire, we, you can wait and you can pay the taxes as you sell it, but whenever I make it, if it's ready, I just pay all the taxes up front, and then it's done, and then they get that. And you have to identify the actual, style, what it is, how much you made, how much, was wasted, how much, and then in the end you have to pay a certain amount of taxes per per barrel.
Similar, yeah.
So what's the size of your brewery there? I think it's in hectoliters, right? Or
so hectoliters, it's about it really depends on how much we can produce per month, but we have a maximum of, I think, 56 hectoliters.
So you can do like 56 at a time, or?
We can do. We can have. Now we're completely full. Our vessels are completely full, so we have 56 hectoliters of beer waiting to finish fermenting and to be bottled. But in a good month, if we produce and bottle, we can easily double that.
Okay, so it's about. Yeah, okay.
And let's call it 100 hectoliters, something like that.
So like 100, you say you produce about 100 hectoliters a month.
Yeah.
So that's about 2,600 gallons. Yeah. All right. So that's a nice sizable amount of alcohol. So it's about 80 barrels a month. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. So that's a nice size brand. You get all that out, but it's interesting your brands that you produce and the story behind them, which is interesting. I like the fact that you're using the local products as well, because this is what we're pushing here. And I guess challenges. What kind of challenges do you see? Like I know they have craft beer. I guess we talked about the bigger beer. Do you see there's a lot of push from? Well, you got the wine industry, then you have the beer industry, and you guys are being taxed. Is there any other challenges you see? Or
I think it's basically getting people to try something different. So Portugal is quite an older country, so lots of elderly people. So they like their wine, and they like their beer to be cheap. Which is easy for big brews.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's the same thing here.
Yeah, so here's the thing. Big beers are always going to be in market because they're cheap and people like them and they grew up with them, and even craft brewers drink them. So if you say you don't drink them, that's a lie, because you most likely drink 1-2 every month. So here, the thing is getting people to try new things and getting people to understand why they're paying a little bit more for it. So you have the story. Some people are into the story and want to understand why you use that product and how do you do it. And some people come and visit the brewery and see, and they really are amazed, but some people just want to pay less money, and that's okay. There's a market for everybody. But besides that, we want people to we want them to be comfortable in spending a little bit more money to buy a good beer, a different beer, a beer that they're most likely going to drink once and maybe drink again and again and again and again, because once you get them to drink it once, if it's really different and if they really like it, they're most likely going to come back for it. So I think the major issue or the major challenge is really to get people to run away from wine and generic beer and come into the craft brewery at least once, to drink it once, and then to hopefully get them hooked enough for a second and a third, and so on.
Mm-hmm. We convert them.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is what we're trying to do here.
Yeah,
that's the whole reason about the podcast, is try to expose craft beer to more people and say that there is an alternative. I mean, the big beer is there's a purpose for big beer too. Like you go to a football match right over there, Portugal,
Exactly.
and you want to drink a lot of beer, so you have the big beer there, and you can have a couple pints, which is great. But also the small beer has its place as well. But it is growing, which is interesting, and I think worldwide it's just going to keep growing. So, all right. Yeah, so I appreciate you coming on. If people want to find out more about you and Portuguese Craft Beer, that is the name of your brewery, which is interesting. Where do they go? I mean, like, can they go on Facebook, or do you have a website? Or
Yeah, we're on Facebook and on Instagram. Basically, the best way to find us is by our brand. So just type in Amphora, that's with a PH, and Alma on Facebook or in Instagram. And our brewery also has a website, which is PortugueseCraftBeer.pt, which is for Portugal. And so basically, come and visit, leave a comment, whatever.
that's great. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting about I found you, and I'm like, well, yeah, there's craft beer in Portugal. That's so interesting because everybody thinks about wine, and the wine is excellent there. But I need. You don't export any of your beer, right? It's just in Portugal.
No. There are Portuguese breweries, small breweries that are starting to export. We have some guys that are exporting to Brazil and even to Russia. So they like our imperial stouts and barrel-aged stouts and barley wine, stuff like that. But basically, a lot of the business is done hyper locally in the region, maybe across the whole country. Some breweries, but mainly the smaller breweries, they tend to stay in their area.
Right. Yeah. It's local.
It's hard to export. Yeah, when you're small, it's hard to export.
No,
to other
yeah,
countries.
you have to make a decision whether it's.
Exactly.
You have to make more beer, but you're making a nice amount.
And if you have time and if things go well, then grow and continue.
Yeah, but you're making a nice amount of beer, which is awesome. So, all right, great. Well, Bruno, I appreciate your time, and I appreciate what you guys are doing there.
Thanks a lot.
I
for
wish
the
you the best. If I'm in Braga, I have to do a trip. I mean, there's so many places I want to go, and I think maybe that's do like a worldwide beer tour, and just talk to everybody. Come visit you guys. We can come to your brewery, see what's happening, try the beer.
You should definitely do that.
Get somebody with a camera and follow me.
Yeah,
that's my goal.
A TV show.
I'm going to make a TV show, and if anybody's out there that wants to do this with me. Michael at craftbeerstorm.com. Let's do it. I think it'd be a great thing. That's what I'm going to focus on next. I got to try to find, because I know we do all beer with Irish barley. That's our thing.
Okay.
And I've already connected with a lot of people in Ireland, so I'm trying to go there maybe this summer somehow, and do some festivals and connect with the media there. And
yeah, sure.
But I would like to try to expand that into other countries as well, because it's I've done that. In the past, just take a backpack and just go for a month and go to different. I was in Lisbon. That was the only part of Portugal, because I had to go to Lisbon and then fly out back to New York from there. But that was beautiful, beautiful country. Beautiful
it is
people.
right. It's really beautiful.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's an awesome festival.
All right, hey Bruno, I appreciate your time and thank you
Thanks
very
a lot.
much. Okay, we'll talk soon. Okay. And there was Bruno Rodrigues. He's the assistant brewer for Portuguese Craft Beer. That's the name of the brewery, and they have those two brands, Alma and Amphora. Great stories behind them. They use a lot of local ingredients, which is fantastic. For each region, they make a different beer, and they do compete with wine. Wine is very popular. When you think of Portugal, what comes out of Portugal? Wine, but craft beer is growing in Portugal, which is interesting. There are a lot more breweries, craft beer bars, so people are seeing this and they're converting. Obviously, the majority of the country grew up on wine, so it's just never going to go away, which is great, But craft beer is growing, and even his region, it's interesting. He has to have the rain, and then they have the sun in the summer. and it's perfect for hops. So a lot more hops are being grown in that region because there's a lot more demand and a lot more farmers are planting. So I'd love to go there one day and kind of check it out. And that's my next quest. I think I need a show. I need a TV show. So if you're a producer out there and you're listening to this, let's talk. Michael at craftbeerstorm.com. That would be freaking awesome, dude. I'm in. Let's do it. One-way ticket around the world, and let's stop at places and let's take a camera. I think that'd be fantastic, And I've made a lot of connections in a lot of countries, so it'd be pretty easy, and I can make a lot more. This podcast has been fantastic. Just getting a lot of interesting stories from people, how they started, the trends in the regions. Sour beer, right? In Portugal, it's good, I guess, but it depends on the local diet, in terms of sour and. But IPAs are booming, and IPAs are all over the place, and IPAs are delicious. They're not the only style, but I love IPAs too, and I think as these hop growers, produce these hybrids, there's going to be a lot more new hops that come out and a lot more excellent beer that's being made. So stay tuned. But that's the Portuguese beer scene. There you go. And who brings this to you? It's us. It's Craft Beer Storm. So if you like what we're doing, please go on to iTunes, give us a rating, give us a review, tell a friend, tell 10 friends. It takes 2 minutes, and it just helps us out tremendously. It gets us up in the rankings, and we get our word out to more and more people as we move along. And we do bring this to you 3 times a week. We have 3 different types of podcasts. We have on Mondays we have we interview people like Bruno. Doing great things in craft beer, founders, brewers of breweries. On Wednesdays, we do beer styles. We go down the Great American Beer Festival list of beers. There's like 102 of them, and then they have subcategories, so we explain each one. What kind of grain goes in it, the color, the hoppiness, what glass to serve it in, examples of it for each style, because there's a lot more styles than just IPAs and lagers, guys. There's a lot more. And then on Fridays, we do craft brew news, which I have to do today because we're recording on Friday, but this is going out on Monday. So that's the story for today. I appreciate you listening. Love you guys. And we'll talk to you on Wednesday. Okay, take care.